to our podcast, Journey to Life, with Constance Fields and yours truly, Arlette Jones-Lawson. Today, our topic is going to be the 3 stages before, during, and after a gathering. We felt like this was a very important topic to discuss, especially around the holidays. For victims of abuse, anyone that's been violated sexually, and the before, during, and the after effects of attending those gatherings or not.
Yeah, and I really think that that's something that's not talked about as often, or at least I haven't heard about it as often as something that people think, oh, this is something survivors would have to grapple with, or how do they handle this? So talking about the before stage of deciding to go to a family function, we just had Thanksgiving, we just had Christmas, any other holidays that you may celebrate, we just experienced those. Going into the new year even, there may be gatherings that you have that you're around friends or family or someone in a even a house or a situation that brings back memories that are not pleasant for you as a survivor. These are some things that you can do or to keep in mind as you navigate that. And so when talking about the before aspect, Mom and I were discussing how pivotal it is to make a decision one way or the other, whether you want to go or you don't want to go. And the first thing to know is that you have complete autonomy to say, no, I don't want to go. because your feelings are valid. And if you're not ready to attend an event, then you're not ready to do that or be around certain people or be in that atmosphere. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And whatever choice you make is the right choice for you.
Exactly. So, you may fear the unknown of making a decision not to go to a function. And one thing I want to point out that may be essential for you as you're navigating your recovery is that PTSD can look like avoidance as well. So you want to make sure that you're taking a look at, why am I avoiding this event? Am I ready to even do this? And if you are ready, what do you need to do to prepare yourself? And so let's kind of get into that a little bit. So if you decided to go to a function, know that it's completely normal to be anxious. You're going to feel all sorts of feelings that come along with memories, or maybe even fearing what people would say if you showed up, even fearing what people would say if you didn't show up. Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. And whatever your answer is, if you decide not to attend, is okay. You have previous engagement. That's a perfectly valid explanation, even if it's that your engagement is to be home and not go out. That's absolutely an option that you can explore. And and the reality is, if you say, I just can't come, that should be enough. You shouldn't have to go through or feel like you have to go through an exhaustive explanation, because then that leads us to embellish the reason why we're not going, and then it makes us feel like we're not being quite honest. And with the whole the whole movement or feeling around having been violated sexually is that you often don't feel believed. And so when we feel like we have to embellish the reason why we don't want to attend or why we can't attend, and we have to make something up to appease whoever we're talking to, it often can make us feel inauthentic and that we're not being truthful. And that's one of the triggers for most of us, is the feeling of not being believed. And when you feel like you're embellishing, then it's easy to feel like you're not being honest.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that 100%. And, you know, for me personally, when I think about how I would handle a situation like going or being invited to something, you know, I personally have social anxiety. And so the thought of being invited to an event actually terrifies me, though I do want to be invited. You know, if it was a situation where I was going into a space that I knew I was going to see someone who had assaulted me, or I knew I was going to be in that kind of environment, if I chose to go, I would then want to have tools in place to prepare me. So that's what we're going to talk about next. How, as a survivor, you can prepare yourself when you get there. What happens when you show up? What now?
And one of the things that's important to do is to determine who your safe space person is. And to find out if they also are going to attend the same function. And if they are, they can perhaps act as a buffer for you. And kind of like your wing woman, you know, both wing man and both wing woman at the event. And that's really important to, if possible, to have a safe space person there that understands your story, believes your story, is protective of you, because they can often run interference. They can sense what you're feeling when you're feeling like you're getting a little overwhelmed. They can often run a buffer, which is very beneficial and powerful. I know with me, my husband is my buffer or my wingman, and that's been very, very helpful throughout the healing process. So
what about if you haven't told anybody? You know what I mean? Like, if you haven't shared with anyone your story about what happened to you, and then you get invited to this function, you know, it's important to have a wing person, absolutely. But what if you don't have anybody that knows and you're not ready to tell?
So then you should set a time limits or time frame on your visit. You should establish what your boundaries are going to be. How long are you planning on staying? How long will you stay if you start feeling a certain way? How long are you willing to be around the abuser or the perpetrator? You want to make those types of decisions prior to attending the function. How long are you willing to stay in a location that may be triggering? And I do say, how long are you willing to stay? Because the choice again is up to you. You get to decide. Because the reality is that there's triggers literally everywhere. You know, anything can be triggering to you. It can be a location, a smell, a person. It can be anything, can be triggering. And so you want to set up your boundaries. I know in chapter 27 of my book, There's More Beyond Surviving: Journey to Life. It discusses the bone consolidation phase. And it talks about the role of reassociation and the things that are in our queue, that are just kind of queued up and ready to go. And so anything can push it into the forefront and can tie it into your assault or your abuse situation, your abuse experience, your abuse fracture. Anything can trigger it. And I know that chapter in particular is geared towards helping us change the association. to that triggering event. So that's one of the things you can do. And another thing that you can do is take frequent breaks.
Yes.
From the situation. I mean, you can, I mean, I don't know very many gatherings that I've attended that haven't needed, a beverage run or an ice run, or, and you can volunteer to be that person to get out of the situation. And the bottom line is that you can leave the environment altogether. I'm tired. This has been a long day. Thank you for inviting me. I wish, sorry I can't stay longer. Whatever your reason for exiting a situation that's becoming overwhelming is okay. And whoever you're communicating that to, if they're not okay with that, that becomes their problem and not yours.
Exactly. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Oh, yeah, because it's so true. A lot of times, like, we feel, well, I don't know, I can only speak from my experience, but a lot of times I espouse how I'm feeling, how somebody else is feeling to how I'm feeling. So, and that'll cause me to gaslight myself, and survivors, we gaslight ourselves. And so it can become a situation where you're like, oh shoot, I really hurt their feelings by leaving early. Maybe I could have stayed a little bit longer. Maybe I could have, maybe it really wasn't that bad what happened to me. Maybe I'm just like overreacting, it can spiral.
Absolutely. And it's a sensory overload is what it is.
Yes.
And we it's not uncommon. So don't feel like you're, outside of the norm. It's not uncommon to replay the visit moment by moment, analyze, what should we have said? What should we have done? How should we have responded? How could I have responded? It's not uncommon for us to examine and replay that over and over. That's not healthy for us to do. And so, because it does lead to us gaslighting ourselves. And, there's already enough self-criticism and blame, self-blame and shame that's surrounding it. We don't need to contribute to that. But we do tend to do a play-by-play. And it's like you said, Constance, we tend to, wonder, could they tell if when I said this, did what message did it send, and how was that portrayed? And especially if your abuser or perpetrator is present at the gathering, because then you worry about, how it's gonna, did you say something that hinted that was the person? And if you did, how will you, how will you handle that if that person who is the perpetrator and the abuser, if that person is somehow offended or feel like you're shining the light on them and their deeds, we tend to feel a guilt around that, because there's a sense of wanting to, I don't know if the right word is protect, but to protect the secret. If nobody knows.
Right.
Because you know that the abuser or the perpetrator knows, and but if nobody else does, that's,
Yeah, I agree. And that too, I mean, all of this that we're talking about now, it has to do with like the after effects of once you leave the party, if there's a party or gathering. But you touched on something that really brought to mind, culturally speaking, a lot of familial situations want to keep it in the family. And, I keep using the word gaslight, but it really is that, where it's like, we're going to protect this person and make you think that you're crazy. They're just like that when they drink, or no, that was so long ago, or if it was a house that you experienced a traumatic event in, and you are uncomfortable in the house, and it happened 20, 30 years ago, you're still dealing with that. It's okay to want to remove yourself from that situation. And anybody who says to you, well, that was 20 or 30 years ago, this is just a house, things like that, you don't need to be as close to that person. In fact, I would say remove that person, because your peace is worth more than somebody's whatever they got to deal with. Like you said earlier, it's their stuff. That's their stuff.
That's their stuff. I always say, follow your peace. Where your peace is, that's where you should be. And when you're talking about being around someone that's minimizing your experience, that is not a safe space person.
No.
And so everyone that gains admittance into your safe space circle should earn it. And those examples that you gave, Constance, are examples of people who clearly don't deserve and clearly haven't earned admittance into that circle. And your safe space circle is not going to be as large as some people would hope that it would be. And there may be you can probably count it on one hand, and that is okay, because the people that have gained admittance have earned your trust, and protect you and believe you.
Right.
And those are important attributes to have when determining who your safe space people are gonna be.
Yeah, and honestly, it doesn't matter who it is. I know that generationally, there are generations of people who, this is just the way things were. This is just how they are, and now you have this shift in the generations where mental health is essential. You're healing your what is the word I'm thinking of? Childhood trauma. That's not the word I'm thinking of, but it has to do with your childhood trauma.
Right. I call it fracture.
Yeah, in your book. Yeah, abuse fracture. They're so focused on healing that it doesn't matter if it's your parents or a sibling or another relative or your best friend. If they're not nurturing your healing or helping facilitate your growth and building you up toward that, then that's not a relationship that you need to continue to blossom.
Exactly. They become, those types of relationships become toxic.
Very toxic.
And nothing grows in a toxic environment. Nothing grows around toxic people. And you have to make a decision that your healing and your growth is much more important than protecting someone else's reputation.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
So good. So
absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So after, the aftermath of everything, when you're starting to spiral into the what ifs, or how did this go, or what if I wouldn't have said this, or maybe I should have done this, then that can lead to depression. And survivors, a good majority of survivors experience depression, PTSD, anxiety,
right,
from their experiences, and that aftermath can play into that.
Absolutely. And Constance, I think you're going to discuss a very important area, and not uncommon issue, and that's the issue of suicide.
Yeah. So it's a very sensitive topic, but it is one that is necessary to discuss. And, you know, one of the things that can lead to a depression in a survivor is re-victimization. And going to a holiday gathering, you do run that risk of re-victimization. And by that, if you don't know what that means, you know, re-victimization is just re-experiencing being a victim again. And it may be a different way. It may be in what somebody says. It may be in something that the perpetrator says to you. You know, but in trying to get you to let go of the past, let go of what happened to you when it hasn't been dealt with, that's re-victimization as well. Mm-hmm. And so the potential for suicide ideology is very high in survivors. It was interesting though, Mom, I was doing some research on it because there is that belief that during the holidays, suicide rates are higher, but it's actually a myth. So suicide rates are actually lower. They actually decrease in the holidays. And researchers are now finding that a lot of that has to do with a sense of togetherness. And that is, you know, from Psychology Today. Now, that article was written a few years ago, and we don't know what the effects of COVID have been for, you know, the holidays and suicide, but certainly it was true when this article was written. And another thing to point out is that that the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, I wanted to make sure I got that right as I was reading it. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center, they have studies that are actually show that survivors of sexual assault are 10 times more likely to attempt suicide. And that's over those who have not had that lived experience of being a survivor. And then when you look at teenagers, and the younger you are, so the rate is, if you've had an experience of sexual assault before the age of 16, then you're at greater risk for suicide attempts. And so we want to make sure that we include in this, when we post it, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. Mm-hmm. It's 1-800-273-8255. And you can also text the word home to 741-741. There's also RAIN, the National Sexual Assault Line, and that number is 1-800-656-4673. It's important that you feel safe enough to share your story, even if it's, you know, on a hotline. If you're feeling stressed, triggered, if you're feeling any kind of anxiety or depression from the holidays, your decision not to go to something or your decision to go to something, having that go-to is going to be pivotal to your survival.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as Constance said, that link will be also included in this podcast, so that those are excellent references. I wanted to say, I read one time a saying that said, "Tell your story." If people had wanted you to write or talk warmly about them, they should have behaved better. And that moved me a lot, because your experience is your experience, and you have a right to tell it. You have a right to talk about it. You have a right to feel what you're feeling. You have a right to heal. And remember that it is not your responsibility to make the life of the perpetrator or the abuser better. That's not your responsibility.
Right.
Their concern was not in making your life easier. If it had been, they would not have made the choices that they made to harm you. So know that you should not take those responsibilities on you. and how your truth affects negatively their life. Any choice that you make to tell your story or to talk about your story is yours to make. And how it affects the person that negatively impacted your life in that way, that's on them. How they handle that, that's a consequence of their choice. And so don't own that.
That's great. That is nuggets. nuggets. Gems, as they say. One thing we didn't talk about, I know we're coming to the end here, but one thing we didn't talk about is being a survivor's support in that time. Like, what is it like for a person to love someone who has been assaulted and accompany them to an event, or be that phone call that they get after the fact? Would you say it's equally as important for that person to experience self-care as well and take care of themselves as well?
It is very important for that person to because the supporter who loves and believes in that person feel they hurt when that person hurts. That's what love is. And so it's absolutely important that person, kind of gird up, kind of build up whatever they need to build up to be a support. Because, the whole premise of being a support is the ability to be able to hold something up, to help stabilize something. And to be a stabilizing force, you've got to be stable.
Exactly.
And so it's very important that they also take care of themselves. And in future podcasts, we're going to be discussing how to be a supporter of someone that has experienced any type of sexual violation. What to say, how to act, and just giving tools and to know from the point of view of a supporter what it's like. And so that's one of the subjects that we'll discuss further in the future podcasts. Also, the subject of intimacy.
Yes.
As it relates to someone that has been violated sexually. And we'll discuss that further in future podcasts as well.
I can't wait. Those are going to be some really intense, heavy topics, but I just know that it's going to help so many people, and I'm getting excited thinking about the next one and what we have for you guys. We definitely want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories. We want to hear your questions. What was your takeaway from this podcast? Did you learn anything? Did you learn anything you can share with somebody that you know as a survivor? And just reach out to us. We want to hear from you.
We absolutely do. And any ideas for future podcasts, any subjects you want us to examine further, absolutely let us know. We want to be what you need.
Absolutely. Wow, this was fun.
Yay. Thank you all for your time and listening, and we hope you'll be blessed by this podcast and future podcasts.
Bye. Be blessed.
Bye.